Hello Vampers. Well, today I want to finish something I started 9 months ago. I created a video 9 months ago with the title How I Ended Up Living in a Van. And really that was a misleading title because I ended up talking about my life story and not really about how I ended up living in a van. So today I'd like to expand on that. Now, existing viewers, welcome back. And if you're new to my channel, my name is Neil and I'm 61 and I live full-time in my self-converted camper van. Now, the initial greeting on this video, hello Vampers, is something which I've adopted. I've coined the word Vampers to distinguish from campers. I don't know if the word vampers actually exists, but that's what I'm using. And like I say, today I'm going to be talking about how I ended up living in a van. And if you stick around a little bit later, I'll talk about the things I've learnt over the last 12 months living in my van. Now, a month ago, or 2 months ago, I did a video which was entitled Why I Live in a Van. And at my first Van Fest a month ago, I met Nomad Season from YouTube and he did an interview with me and a van tour. Now recently I've just watched those two videos back and I've come to the conclusion that I didn't really cover how I ended up living in a van. I briefly mentioned some things, but I spent quite a lot of time talking about the camper conversion. So today that's what I'm going to be talking about. But before I continue, I want to mention some of the videos I've seen on YouTube, specifically men who live in vans. And they've been given a hard time, I think, by some of the other YouTubers. And it's like stereotypical that they've all had issues. And that's why they ended up living in vans. So I'd like to mention some of the things which don't apply to me. I hadn't just come out of a broken relationship or got divorced, not suffering from alcoholism. I mean, I like a drink like most people, but I'm not an alcoholic, or wasn't an alcoholic, and still not an alcoholic. I wasn't a drug addict, still not a drug addict. Mental health issues. Apart from being down every now and again, like most people, that's the only problem I had, mental health problem. I hadn't lost my job or my home. And financial worries. There was no financial disaster. And these are all the things which are stereotypical, according to some YouTube videos. As I say, men seem to have been getting a bad rap lately. I'm not chasing solo van women either. That's another thing which seems to pop up quite often. If I meet a woman who lives in a van, nice chap, but I'm not trying to pick him up. Again, that's something else which has been mentioned. So I thought I just wanted to get that out there before we carry on. So as I said, how I ended up living in a van. This is the story. Well, it begins back in 2023, but truly it goes further back. I've always liked camping. I've always liked adventure. I've always liked walking. And for years, I've been in a tent. As you gradually get older, you want a few more comforts. And one of the triggers for me was the last time I was in camping near Windermere in the Lake District. I got out for a nice hill walk on a nice day, which turned into a really bad day with lots of rain. And I returned to my tent, soaked through, stripped off, got in my tent, still wet, and thought, there must be better ways of doing this, more comfortable. And that was the first time I thought about getting a camper van. I kept thinking about it. So in 2023, I'd heard a story I've mentioned before, where somebody retired, did a camper van and then died before they got to use it. So at that stage I was 59. And that sort of triggered me to think even more about getting a camper van. My initial reasons for doing this was to replace the tent. I was thinking about getting a little Volkswagen or a little van of some sort, so that when I went away on my adventures and my walks and I came back, I'd have a dry roof over my head and somewhere to hang my wet clothes. And then I could drive from A to B and do a walk, or even go away for a week and drive to different destinations. And these are the reasons, initial reasons, that I was going to get a camper van. Now, when I first started looking, so this was after COVID, and there was still a high demand for staycations, if you like, and so the price of vans had shot up. And when I started looking, it was really, really expensive. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 pounds for a little van. A lot more expensive than a tent. Now, if you bear with me, because I'm waffling a little bit already, I'll get to how I ended up living in a van. So initially I was looking for just a weekend, because I was going to be a weekend warrior. But the prices were so astronomical, it didn't really make any financial sense to do that. But I still kept looking. And it was after a visit to my brother, to see my brother, who'd had an old Volkswagen split screen camper van for years. And we got talking about, well, people buy vans and do conversions themselves. Maybe that's a cheaper option to do. So we discussed it, and he'd always wanted to do one, so he was eager to get involved. And I thought with his help, we could probably do something. Well, the only problem at that time was financial, in that buying a van and doing a conversion was going to cost some money, which I didn't have any savings in my bank account, because I've always lived month to month. When I get money, I spend it. It's to be enjoyed. I've got no dependents, so that's the way I lived. Now, when I worked in London, I worked for a local council, and I was in the local council pension. The public sector pensions are really good. They pay out quite a decent amount of money. And in 2023, they'd sent me a letter explaining that from when you're 55, you can pull your pension. So that's how people retire at 55. They can get their pension from then, if it's a private pension. So I contacted them and discussed how much money I could get. I could start pulling my pension straight away, and I'd get X amount per month. But there was also an option to take a lump sum and still have a pot which would give some money each month. So that seemed the way to get the finances together. But I was still looking at getting a van for the weekends. About this time I started watching YouTube regular and started following Vanlifers on YouTube and how they lived in their vans. Not sure if they all did live full-time in their vans. Now, since then I've come to the conclusion that a lot of full-time van lifers on YouTube are not actually full-time. But that's another story. So after I pulled the lump sum, I had a nice little pot to play with. And the next goal was to find a van. Now, after watching YouTube van conversions, all the different vans which had been converted, there's too many to choose from. And the prices varied. So I started looking and going visiting different showrooms, second-hand dealers, finding vans on Marketplace, etc. And I'm driving around trying to find a van. A suitable van. Still in the back of my mind with the idea I'd just be going away at the weekends and long weeks on holiday. But that seemed to be a big financial purchase for occasional use. There was also the issue where I would keep the van when I wasn't using it. So these things are all contributed to a change of heart at a later stage. So after watching lots of YouTube videos, I came to the conclusion that I wanted a Mercedes Sprinter, long wheelbase with a high top. So the search was on. Prices ranged from 5,000 to 30,000. And I come to understand that Sprinters the engines were really good and they could go for hundreds of thousands of miles. But I was looking to get something with a reasonable mileage and not too old. Because the last thing I wanted was to buy a cheap £5,000 van and have to spend another 5,000 on a new engine. So eventually I found one, 2018 yellow Sprinter, ex-DHL van, 120,000 miles on the clock, and paid £12,000 for it, which was quite a lot of money out of my pot. But I still had a fairly decent amount left to do the conversion. Before I got the van, with discussions with my brother, we discovered that we didn't have anywhere to do the works. No family had a driveway or a garage big enough to take a van. So we had to look for a workspace, and I ended up renting a lock-up with a parking space. So we could take the van there keep it in the parking space, and have our tools and all the things we were going to need could go in the lock-up. So eventually I got the van and taken it to the lock-up, all ready to begin this new adventure of converting a van into a camper van. Well, lots of research on YouTube to find out how to do a conversion, what sort of conversion we should do. It was during this period that I started to have doubts. And the doubts were not about the conversion, but the doubts was about how I was going to use the van. A big outlay of money like that for occasional use didn't seem to make any sense to me. And after watching all these videos on YouTube of people living in their vans, that sort of started triggering thoughts in my head of an alternative way of living. Rather than being in bricks and mortar and paying rent and council tax and your electric bills and everything else, maybe this was going to be better. So I'm not really going to talk a great deal about the conversion. I've covered that in other videos, and if you like, you can see a 20-minute time-lapse video in my playlists of the whole van conversion. Check it out, it's quite good. So I've come to the conclusion then, I'm spending all this money, I don't only want to be using it at the weekends or going away for a week's holiday. I'm thinking about moving in and living full time. With these thoughts in my head, the build changed. I decided that if I was going to live in a van, I wanted all more cons in it. I wanted to be comfortable. And this decided the whole style of my van. So if I'm going I'm going to be using this at the weekend van. So we're just going to have a bed and a sink and not much else in there. And that changed to, it's got to have lots of things in it. Lots of storage. I want this, I want that. Which also entailed spending more money. Now I've mentioned this previous videos. I think the total cost for my conversion, including the van, was about 32, maybe 33,000, after I'd upgraded the wheels and tyres and put air assist on the back. So it's still a lot cheaper than if I'd taken the van somewhere and had it converted by professionals, or if I'd bought a pre-used, pre-converted van, or a brand new one, with the prices ranging up to £100,000 for these conversions. Mine was expensive in the scheme of things, but not to me, because it has everything I wanted. So, how I ended up living in a van, that's what I'm supposed to be talking about. Well, it was a choice. It wasn't forced on me. But I'm saying it wasn't forced on me. There was an incident just after I finished the van builds where there was an arson attack on my car and it was burnt out, which was the trigger to push me into the van full time and leave my old home. But that wasn't, I mean, that contributed to the move into the van. But up until then, it was my choice to move into the van. I looked at the cost of living. Everything was going up again. Even during the 9 months it took to do the conversion, things had gone up. Rents had gone up, council tax had gone up, the electrics had gone up, water rates had gone up. So all these things were increasing, with no sign of any of them going back down. So there was a financial reason to how I ended up in a van. But again, that was a choice. I mean, during the conversion, I went from working full-time to 4 days a week to 3 days a week, and then finally just to 2 days a week, which I still continue to do. I work Saturday and Sunday each week, and that helps finance my new nomadic lifestyle. So that's really how I ended up living in a van, through choice. Now, as I said at the beginning, I've been living in the van now full time for 12 months, and some of the things I've learnt can't be understood unless you actually live full time in a van. The way you live your life is completely different from living solo in a house or a flat. Even a small flat has a lot more room than a van. Storage issues, you can't carry everything. I mean, I've soon realised throughout the winter and now into summer is you have to have somewhere to store things besides your van. You can't carry everything for winter and everything for summer in your van. And I've realised this over the last 12 months. And also with talking to other full-time van lifers. Everybody seems to be in the same boat. I haven't met anybody yet who doesn't have a lockup or some storage somewhere, maybe with family and friends, because you can't physically carry everything. Another thing I've learned is to live with less. When I first moved in, I brought a lot of clothes. Normally, when you live at home or in a home or a flat, not sure if everybody's the same, but changing clothes every single day seems to be the norm. But living in a van, the norm is to wear clothes more than one day, maybe 3 days before changing. I don't have a washing machine in my van, so you have to conserve things. But you can still be clean. That's another misconception, I think, as well, is that van lifers are not very clean people. There's lots of ways to keep clean. I don't have a shower in my van, not an internal shower. I have an outside shower, which I've used twice so far in the summer, which was quite good. But there's plenty of places to have a shower if you don't have a shower in your van. Service stations, there's quite a lot of service stations with showers. Swimming pools, gyms, leisure centres. But also, I found I don't need to have a shower every day. I don't really get dirty. Apart from work, when I go to work I might get a bit dirty. But there's a shower at work, so I utilise that. Have a good wash in the morning, have a good wash in the evening. Use wet wipes. Although I'm starting to think they're not very environmentally, probably not that good for the environment. So I'm looking for something, an environmentally friendly wet wipe. If any of you know of any, let me know in the comments. Food's a different issue as well. You can't carry as much. Everything is weight related in a van. So that's what you have to think about. I mean, a litre of water equals 1 kilogram. I have a underslung 80 litre water tank. But if I carry 80 litres, that's 80 extra kilograms. So if I'm driving 300 miles, I'm not going to want to carry 80 litres of excess water. It has an impact on diesel when I'm driving heavy. So water usage is a big change for me. When you live in a house, water's on tap, you turn it on, you let it run and waste a lot of water. When you live in a van, you conserve water. And that's one of the key things I've learnt in the last 12 months, I think. Water, you can't live without it, but you can make sure you don't waste it. And that's my message to you. Think about it. Don't waste it. So I'm not sure if I've really covered how I ended up living in a van to your satisfaction. If you want to know some more, let me know in the comments. If you want to know more about my van, let me know in the comments. So I hope you've found my little story entertaining. If you have, give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed before, and you feel like subscribing, please do so. It doesn't cost you anything, and it will help my channel grow. So until the next time, vampers, it's bye for now.